Right. So Unit 1, Lesson 21. So making inferences in fiction. Something, again, that we've covered several times now, but looking at some more fiction writing and how that's going to play out there. So for our lesson today, by the time you complete this one, you'll be able to make an educated guess based on suggestions and clues found in fictional text. And keep in mind what we just did in social studies. It's very related. We're going to be drawing conclusions in fiction as well, and language arts, but thinking about taking a step back. It's like, well, how do you get to the conclusions? First, you make those inferences, those educated guesses about what you're reading. So let's take a look here at our audio. Oh, no audio, actually, just a box. So like nonfiction writers, fiction writers do not explain all elements directly. As you learned in Lesson 8, readers sometimes must make inferences or educated guesses based on suggestions and clues found in the text. When making an inference, readers combine what they know about a subject with the information found in the text. Then they make a reasonable guess about what the author intended. So we'll see that in practice here. So our passage here, 50 degrees below zero, it's from To Build a Fire by the writer Jack London in 1916. And it says, but all this, the mysterious, far-reaching hairline trail, the absence of sun from the sky, the tremendous cold, and the strangeness and weirdness of it all, made no impression on the man. It was not because he was long used to it. He was a newcomer in the land, a Chicago, I believe, and this was his first winter. The trouble with him was that he was without imagination. He was quick and alert in the things of life, but only in the things and not in the significances. 50 degrees below zero meant 80-odd degrees of frost. Such fact impressed him as being cold and uncomfortable, and that was all. It did not lead him to meditate upon his frailty as a creature of temperature, and upon man's frailty in general. Able only to live within certain narrow limits of heat and cold, and from there on it did not lead him to the conjectural field of immortality and man's place in the universe. 50 degrees below zero stood for a bite of frost that hurt, and thus must be guarded against by the use of mittens, ear flaps, warm moccasins, and thick socks. 50 degrees below zero was to him just precisely 50 degrees below zero. That there should be anything more to it than that was a thought that never entered his head. And our top text there in our A box, looking at the underlying part, but all this, the mysterious far-reaching hairline trail, the absence of sun from the sky, the tremendous cold, and the strangeness and weirdness of it all made no impression on the man. So it says here, the first sentence suggests that the man is detached from his surroundings, right? Mysterious, far-reaching hairline trail, the absence of sun, made no impression on the man. Strangeness and weirdness, right? That's, you can assume there, you can make an inference that this is a foreign land to this person. And then next it says he was a newcomer in the land, a Chicago, and this was his first winter. So from this explanation that this is the man's first winter in the area, you can infer that the man may lack experience in cold, rugged climates, right? That's something, immediately he was a newcomer in the land. Well, that can mean several things. Maybe he doesn't know the language, maybe he's, maybe he doesn't know his way around, or maybe he's not used to that environment. In this case, it would be a cold winter. So those are all inferences, right? Educated guesses. All right, so let's go to our quiz. My cat has joined me in my lap. She gets cold too, and I'm the hottest thing in the apartment, so she always wants my lap. All right, using logic. So it says, note that the passage suggests that the man's lack of imagination causes him trouble. Use the details in the passage and your knowledge of below freezing temperatures to determine the possible effect of this cause. And you think about the temperature we're dealing with here, right? It's 14 or so. Well, it was like 14 degrees. Let's see what the temperature is now. It is, what does it say? About 20, 21 degrees here. And you know how that feels. Think about what 50 below feels, how fast you're going to freeze, how fast you're going to get frostbite, the way the air is going to feel. So number one, Etta, you want to read number one for us?
Okay. Why is the man's lack of imagination a problem? A, because the man considers only facts related to the cold weather. He does not contemplate the potential extent of the danger it poses. B, because the man is not impressed by the hairline trail in the absence of sun. He risks getting lost in the frozen wilderness. C, because the man does not think about being uncomfortable. He may not have packed the proper gear for his journey. Or D, because the man does not perceive the significance of life. He is not intrigued by the strangeness of the frozen wilderness. Is it A?
Yeah. Because the man considers only facts related to the cold weather, he does not contemplate. So lack of imagination, right? I mean, with a little bit of imagination, like I'm talking about, what would it be like to be out in 50-degree weather? Imagine, or below 50 degrees, imagine what that's like. Imagine, how you're going to feel. That's going to help you prepare for it and give you some concern. If you can't imagine what's going to happen to you in that environment, how hostile that environment is, you're going to lack concern and you might not be prepared. So that's all inferring that what the problem could be there. One is A, and we have an interrupted standoff. Tracy, would you like to read this paragraph for us?
Yes. The interrupted standoff. The two enemies stood glaring at one another for a long silent moment. Each had a rifle in his hand. It had hate in his heart and murder uppermost in his mind. The chance had come to give full play to the passions of a lifetime. But a man who has been brought up under the code of a retraining civilization cannot easily nerve himself to shoot down his neighbor in cold blood and without a word spoken, except for an offense against his health and honor. And before the moment of hesitation had given way to action, a deed of nature on violent overwhelmed them both. A fierce shriek of the storm had been answered by a splitting crash over their heads and an ear. They could lift aside a mass of falling beech tree had thundered down on them. Ulrich von Gawitz found himself stretched on the ground, an arm numb beneath him, and the other held almost as helplessly in a tight tangle of forked branches, while both legs were bent beneath the fallen mass. His heavy shooting boots had severed his feet from being crushed to pieces. But if his fracture were not as serious as they might have been. At least it was evident that he could not move from his present position till someone came to release him. The descending squid had slashed the skin of his face, and he had to wink away some drop of blood from his eyeglasses before he could take in a general view of the disaster at his side, so near that under ordinary circumstances he could almost have thought him lay struck, naive, alive and struggling, but obviously has as helplessly pinioned down as himself. On around them lay a thick, true wet rake of splintered branches and broken twigs.
All right. I'll read the next two there. So relief at being alive and exasperation at his captive plight brought a strange medley of pious thank offerings and sharp curses to Ulrich's lips. George, who was nearly blinded with the blood which trickled across his eyes, stopped his struggling for a moment to listen, and then gave a short, snarling laugh. So you're not killed as you ought to be, but you're caught anyway, he cried. Caught fast. Ho, what a jest. Ulrich van Gradwitz, snared in his stolen forest. There's real justice for you. And that's from The Interlopers by Saki, 1919. Is one of those kind of cool stories. It's a trope that you'll see a lot in television, movies, and other writing, where you have enemies who are forced to align, like they have to resolve their differences in order to, survive. Whether it's survive in the wild, the elements, another enemy, they have to resolve their issue because they're forced into the situation. And that's what we have here. These two people were going to shoot each other, and they hesitate, and then lightning strikes a tree, and they're both pinned under the tree at that point. So question 2, Christiana, you want to read question 2?
Okay. The question says, based on the details in the passage, which is the most likely inference to make about the man's unwillingness to shoot each other? A, each man is unwilling to abandon a lifelong passion. B, human laws and tradition curbs an inclination towards violence. C, the act of murder requires a mental, not a heartfelt hatred. D, before killing an enemy, an attacker must deliver a statement of wrongs. Is it A?
It's B. B is in boy. So up here it says, each had hate in his heart and murder uppermost in his mind. Chance had come to give full play to the passions of a lifetime, but a man who has been brought up under the code of restraining civilization cannot easily nerve himself to shoot down his neighbor. So that code of restraining civilization, right, is those human laws and traditions that curb us from violence and acting in that way. B is in boy there. And 3, Grace, could you read 3 for us?
All right. The passage states, Nature's own violence overwhelmed them both. On the basis of this event, the most likely inference to make is that nature A also holds hatred in its heart. B cares nothing for heart and honor. C not susceptible to the course of civilization. And D can reinforce the passions of a lifetime. Is it C or B?
It's C, not susceptible to the codes of civilization, right? Nature doesn't give a hoot about your laws. She's going to do what she wants. I'm looking outside right now and it's snowing. So, depending on how you feel about snow, she doesn't care. She's going to snow anyway. So yeah, that's the whole idea. Nature's own violence overwhelmed them both. But of course you can infer, right? Nature interrupting, it doesn't matter. Nature is violent and wild. So, and it doesn't, adopt any of our sort of understandings of a moral code. So, 3 is C. Sasha Gay, could you read number 4?
Okay. After the accident, Ulrich and Gradwitz cannot move until someone comes to release them, and George's name is helplessly pinned down as well. In this situation, the two men are most likely to A, shoot each other, B, appreciate the importance of their feud, C, tend to each other's wounds, or D, stop being enemies. Is it D?
Yeah, right. They're forced into a new situation. And you can even see by the end here, right? They're talking to each other. And with that, and the fact that they're both struggling, that they're probably going to have to stop with whatever, issue they have, however they got themselves in this situation between the two of them. They're going to have to stop being enemies and they're going to have to figure out what to do here. So 4 is D. You can make that inference by what you read there. Tracy, could you read 5 for us?
Yes. The question, what does the contrast between the man's potential violence and nature's actual violence imply? A, natural is more deadly than human because it lacks feeling. B, humans are more deadly than nature because they have feeling. Nature is the deadly enemy of humankind. The humankind is the deadly enemy of nature. Nature. B.
A.
A.
Yeah, nature is more deadly than humans because it lacks feelings. So we get that with the idea, or to say it, nature's own violence overwhelmed them both. But more importantly, they hesitated in their actions because they're bound by this sort of moral code of humankind. And nature, boom, just stepped right in. It was like, nope, no feelings. I'm going to do what I want to do. So yeah, that results in nature. It's definitely the contrast, right? That's what we're looking for here too. We've talked about compare and contrast. So what is the difference between the potential violence of man and the violence of nature? And here's some keywords for you too, right? To kind of clue you in. Potential violence for man, but actual violence of nature. So you can infer there that if nature's acting that way, that it lacks feelings. Why is it potential violence for man, but actual violence for nature? What's stopping them? And it's going to be their feelings. All right, so A for 5. And finally, number 6, back to Etta for the last one here on the quiz. Etta, you there? Etta can't read right now, so I'll go ahead and finish out here. So which problem does the men's predicament most resemble? Is it A, carelessness resulting in forest fires, B, violent crime in urban settings, C, bullying among school children, or D, neglect of storm warnings?
Is it D?
Yeah, D is in dog, right? They are not paying attention and it comes to bite them. D is in dog for number 6. So following up here, our answers are 1 is A, 2 is B as in boy, 3 is C, 4 is D as in dog, 5 is A, and 6 is D as a dog, right? And we'll move on here to the workbook. All right, again, making inferences requires readers to look for suggestions, small details to provide clues about events, characters, or other elements in the story. The small details may give information about the story's setting, for example, or about a character's background or motives. By making inferences, you can better understand a character, situation, and other parts of the story that are not explicitly stated. So this is also lending itself to active reading, right? I've mentioned this before. Reading's not a passive activity. You want to be involved in the process. You ask yourself questions along the way. You ask yourself, about what's going to happen next. If you just sit there and just kind of zone out and read things, your retention is not as good. You don't remember things as well. You want to think about what's going to happen next, and things like that will help you set up. Just in generally speaking, make you a stronger reader with better comprehension. So this one is Mother is Upset, from The Revolt of Mother by Mary E. Wilkins. So it says here, now, Father, look here. Sarah Penn had not sat down. She stood before her husband in the humble fashion of a scripture woman. I'm going to talk real plain to you. I never have since I married you, but I'm going to now. I ain't never complained, and I ain't going to complain now, but I'm going to talk plain. You see this room here, Father? You look at it well. You see there ain't no carpet on the floor, and you see the paper is all dirty and dropping off the walls. We ain't had no new paper on it for 10 years, and then I put it on myself, and didn't cost you but 9 pence a roll. You see this room, Father? It's all the one I've had to work in and eat in and sit in since we was married. There ain't another woman in the whole town whose husband ain't got half the means you got, but what's got better. It's all the room Nanny's got to have her company in, and there ain't one of her mates but what's got better. And their father's not so able as hers. It's all the room she'll have to be married in. Father, ain't you got nothing to say? Said Mrs. Penn. I've got to go off after that load of gravel. I can't stand here talking all day. So, first off, thinking about this as I was reading, this is omniscient point of view, right? Because we hear things like her. We can tell, from that point of view that we are outside of the first person. We're not Sarah Penn, right? This is an omniscient point of view. So A, under the underlined part here, the details about Sarah Penn indicate that she has been obedient and accepting during her marriage. You can infer that she talks plainly now because she has lost patience, right? So this whole idea that she's getting into is like, I want to talk real here. I've never talked to you like this before, but I'm going to talk plain now. So she's very easygoing with her, has been in her marriage, and has probably taken a sort of a backseat to her husband's wants and wishes, right? And then secondly, it says Sarah's comments about the condition of the room and her comparison with other people's homes. You can infer that Sarah has lost patience with her husband's stinginess. So you can, from the first part, right, where she's talking about, you could tell she's frustrated. I'm going to talk real plain to you. I've never have since I married you, but I'm going to now. I ain't never complained. I ain't going to complain now, but I'm going to talk plain. And then, she's frustrated here. She's showing how, when they're talking about paper, they're talking about wallpaper. That, it's been up on the walls for like 10 years. We paid next to nothing for it. I put it up myself. This is the same room I, live in, eat in, all of this stuff. And other women in their town, is what she's saying here, their husbands don't make the money that her husband makes, yet they have better things. They have nicer things. So why doesn't she? That's what she's pointing out here. And you can all infer that she's upset and she's kind of lost it with her husband's stinginess. All right, so on to our workbook. And here for our tip, it says look for evidence of characters' references to events that occurred in the past. These clues often can help explain conflicts that take place in the present. So like how long her wallpaper's been up, right? How little she paid for it, things like that. It's building a background on that character, and then you can later make inferences about how that character reacts in a situation, why they feel the way they do at this point, things of that nature. So number one, Grace, could you read question 1 for us?
Okay. What is the most logic inference to make about Sarah's eagerness to improve the condition of her home? A, her daughter will be married in the room. B, Sarah feels cold without a carpet on the floor. C, her husband will be more comfortable in improved surroundings. And D, she has complained about it for years and wants to take action now. A?
Yeah, her daughter, right, will be married in the room. It's one of the last things we hear there. She says towards the end, it's all the room she'll have to be married in. So yeah, A is there. And that's probably what has finally sort of, made her this boil over, is that she's put up with it for so long, but now it's going to also affect their daughter, right? Because she's going to get married in this kind of lackluster room, looks cheap. So, now that's kind of pushed her over the top. All right. Sasha Gay, you want to read number 2 for us?
Okay, the most logical inference about Sarah's husband is that he, A, likes to entertain friends, B, is reluctant to spend money, C, earns barely enough to live on, D, is willing to discuss problems. Is it B?
B, yeah. And because we get the impression that maybe he makes enough to, improve their home and buy new wallpaper and this and that. She alludes to that with the fact that she's talking about the other women in the town whose husbands don't seem to do as well as he does. So, and then of course that allows you to rule out some of the other ones, right? So, well, no, it's not because he doesn't make enough money. They don't really talk about entertaining friends. He's not willing to discuss the problem, right? The only thing he says there is at the end, he's like, I can't stay here talking all day. I've got a load of gravel to take care of. So yeah, B as a boy for number 2. And 3, Edie has T with children. Christiana, could you read the first 2 paragraphs?
Okay. In the middle of an April night in 1990, a plain woman named Edith Fax left from England to California on a tide of world peace, arrived at the ransom house to raise five half orphaned children. A few hours later, at 7 in the morning, this edit, more widely called Eddie, invited the 3 eldest to her room for tea. They were James, 7, Lizzie, 6, and Jenny, 4, being handed cups of tea, no matter how reduced by milk, made them believe that they had grown up overnight. Have some sugar, said Eddie, and spoon it in. Moments later, she said, have another cup, but her his
H's. Yeah, it's just making a point. H's, yeah.
Okay, but her H's went unspoken and became the first of hundreds, then thousands, which would accumulate in the corners of the house, and taken in the air like sights. In addition, in an adjoining room, the twins and entirely responsible for their mother's death. Their mother had finished their bottles and fallen back into guiltless sleep. At the far end of the house, the widower Thomas Ransom, who had spent the night is it Please, what's that word? The A, is it
I lost my place. Spent.
The last.
Aching.
It's been aching. Yeah, aching. Truant.
Okay.
Yep.
Who had spent the night aching for his truant wife, lay across his bed, half awake, half asleep, and dreamy.
Okay. Yeah. So truant, for one, yeah, that's a word you don't encounter very much. Basically meaning missing or absent. Like there used to be truant officer. I don't know, there might still be, but truant officers would come check on your kids if they were missing from school. You know, truancy is the act of sort of missing school, but it can also be any type of absence. And what it's saying there above, you know, she, but her H's went unspoken. So here's something else you can infer. She's from England. So she's speaking with an accent, and in certain regions of England, they'll drop their H's, especially if it's at the beginning of a sentence. So she's saying like, have some sugar, have another cup, and not getting that H sound out. So that's what that's talking about there. All right. And Sasha Gabe, could you read question 3 for us?
Which is the most likely inference to make about Edie? A, she is from England. B, she is from California. C, she dislikes tea. And D, she dislikes children. Is it?
I don't want to leave it alone.
Is it A?
Yeah, A. Right. And it says she came from England. It doesn't mean she's necessarily, you know, lived there, but that was the last place she was before California. And the other clues we get, right? T, for one, that's kind of an English thing, right? the Brits love their tea, and the way she speaks. So she's dropping her H's. Have another cup, which would be sort of indication of a British or English accent. So those, clues, then you can infer that she's from England. Right. So number 3 is A. Tracy, could you read number 4 for us, please?
Yes. On the basis of the information in the passage, what most likely has happened to Mrs. Grantham? She has A. Moved to England. B. Abandoned her children. C. Died in childbirth. D. Divorced her husband. Mr. Ransom. She moved to England.
She probably died in childbirth. So if we look, for one, it talks about the beginning, arrived at the Ransom house to raise 5 half-orphan children. So if you're only half orphan, that means you have a remaining parent. And then we can look at the last paragraph there. In an adjoining room, the twins, entirely responsible for their mother's death, had finished their bottles and fallen back into guiltless sleep. So she died in childbirth, right? You're tipped off there that there must have been some type of complication. Also, look at the year, right? 1919. Childbirth in any time is risky. And of course, without modern medical technology, things that could have easily been resolved in through an intervening surgery to save both the mother and the child. In that time, you're not going to see those types of interventions as much. So childbirth is a little more risky at this time. So yeah, so there's the things you look at: half orphan, and then really entirely responsible for their mother's death, which is really sort of a morbid thing to say about twins who just finished their bottle, but that is inferring, right, that she died in childbirth. So 4 is C, and 5, Christiana, could you read 5 for us?
Okay, number 5. From the description of Eddie in the passage, which is the best inference about her character? Eddie is A, desperate for attention. B, annoyed and bored. C,
Stricken
with grief. D, kind of capable. D or C?
D. Yeah, kind and capable. She's making cheese. She's making tea for the children. And this is obviously, from the piece we're getting here, she has come to the U.S. She's come to California to care for these children because they've lost her mother, right? That's the bigger point that you can see here. So yeah, D for number 5, D as in dog. Okay, and then another one about Edie and her tea. Grace, could you read number 6 for us?
Okay. What might Eddie's relationship to the Ransom family? What might Eddie's relationship be to the Ransom family? A, she is most likely the children's aunt who has come to raise them. B, she is most likely the children's grandmother who has come to raise them. C, she is most likely a governess who has been hired to help raise the children. And D, she is most likely Mr. Ransom's new wife. C?
Yeah, a governess, which is sort of an old school term. You don't hear, women that care for families. Nanny, you tend to hear these days and things like that. But and that's a very British sort of idea to a governess. But yeah, that's going to be a woman that you hire to. This would be a perfect example, especially at this time, right? 1919, when men were certainly a lot less involved with maybe raising their children because they were working, and something would happen to the mother, the wife, you may then hire, a governess, and they're going to sort of, take care of the household and also the children. So they're stepping in that role as a mother, basically. The kids. So C there, governess. All right, and 7. Tracy, could you read number 7 for us?
Yes. Which is the most likely inference to make about Mr. Ransom's emotional state? A. The 5 children ignore him. B. He is stricken with grief. C. His responsibilities overwhelm him. D. His dream confront him. D.
B.
B.
Yeah, B as in boy. One word here really explains that. Aching, right? Meaning he's in pain. And it's obviously emotional pain. So who had spent the night aching for his missing wife, his absent wife. So that's the real operative word there. You can infer by that he's stricken with grief. So B as in boy. And number 8, Sasha Gay, could you read number 8 there for us?
Which situation is most like the situation in this passage? A mother-in-law arrives for a summer visit. B, a niece lives with her aunt while attending school. C, a grandfather teaches his grandchildren to play chess. D, a grandmother arrives to help care for a newborn. Is it D?
Yeah, there you go. D as in dog, right? Especially, again, with babies, and these, children are, they're obviously being bottle fed, so they're infants. A man in 1919 trying to do that would probably be completely lost. And of course, a lot of people, we did this. We leaned on, particularly my wife's mother to, help us with childcare and things like that. So that definitely, lines up with what we have in the passage here. This is a lot like a grandmother who's helping take care of a newborn, more so than any of the other ones, right? So yeah, 8 is D as in dog. And okay, so this is back to the interlopers. These are the guys laying under the tree after they're thinking about shooting each other. I'm going to go ahead and read this one because I kind of like the story anyway. So a brief friendship. So no one living can remember seeing a Znaeum, George, and a von Gradwitz, Ulrich, talking to one another in friendship. And what peace there would be among the forester folk if we ended our feud tonight. And if we choose to make peace among our people, there is none other to interfere, no interlopers from outside. For a space, both men were silent, turning over in their minds the wonderful changes that this dramatic reconciliation would bring about. In the cold, gloomy forest, with the wind tearing in fitful gusts through the naked branches and whistling around the tree trunks, they lay and waited for the help that would now bring release and succor to both parties. Let's shout for help, he said. In this lull, our voices may carry a little way. They won't carry far enough, the trees and undergrowth, said George, but we can try together then. The two raised their voices in a prolonged hunting call. Together again, said Ulrich a few minutes later, after listening in vain for an answering hello. I heard something that time, I think, said Ulrich. I heard nothing but the pestilential wind, said George hoarsely. There was silence again for some minutes, and then Ulrich gave a joyful cry. I can see figures coming through the wood. They are following in the way I came down the hillside. Both men raised their voices in as loud a shout as they could muster. They hear us. They've stopped. Now they see us. They're running down the hill toward us, cried Ulrich. How many of them are there? Asked George. I can't see distinctly, said Ulrich. 9 or 10? Then they are yours, said George. I had only 7 out with me. They're all making all the speed they can, brave lads, said Ulrich gladly. Are they your men? Asked George. Are they your men? No, said Ulrich with a laugh, the idiotic chattering laugh of a man unstrung with hideous fear. Who are they? Asked George quickly, straining to see what the other would gladly not have seen. Wolves. So they do reconcile, right? I've talked about this idea in writing. You know, you put enemies in a situation where they have to reconcile their differences to, you know, survive a situation or take on another enemy. And so they're laying there, and the rest of the story indicates that they both have men with them. You know, and so they agree. It's like, okay, let's put aside our differences. Let's get out from under this tree. How about we try to, you know, scream for help together? If we shout together, it'll carry farther. So they both found like, okay, let's do that. And then some of the men might come for us. So, you know, they start shouting and shouting, nothing happens. Finally they shout, and they's like, oh, you know, way out there in the distance, they start seeing movement. You know, they see people, and you know, they can't see real well. So the one guy's asking, it's like, well, you know, I had so many men with me. Are they my men? Are they your men? And then finally they get a little closer, and the one guy is kind of, you know, hysterical now, because, you know, you can imagine sort of the irony of this. You're calling for help. What shows up? A pack of wolves. So that's the idea behind the story there. So for number 9, Christiana, you want to read question 9 for us?
Did you call me?
Yeah. Can you read question number 9?
Oh, okay. What is the most logical inference in the what is the logical inference to make about the relationship between
Ulrich
and George? A. They have been good friends for many years. B. Their families have long been enemies. C. Their families have been business associates. Okay. D. They have been on many adventures together. Is it A or D?
B. Yeah, B is in boy, number 9. So you could look there sort of towards the top, right? No one living can remember seeing as Zenaim and von Gradwitz, right? The 2 family names talking to one another in friendship. So this is a long family feud that we're witnessing here. So yeah, 9 is B as in boy. Grace, could you take number 10 for us?
All right. Ulrich and George do not leave the forest because they are probably A, cold, B, hunting, C, injured, and D, feeding. C, injured.
Yeah, yeah. George and Ulrich do not leave the forest because maybe, I don't know, they're pinned under a tree. Yeah, and there's also indication that, you know, not only are they pinned under a tree, but they've sustained injuries. We saw in the earlier part, you know, that the one's having trouble seeing because there's blood running into his eyes, his arms numb. So yeah, they're definitely struggling there, and they are injured. Okay, so 11. Tracy, could you read 11 for us?
How do Ulrich and George feel about their various situation? A, annoyed with their men for lagging behind. B, thankful for their newfound friendship. C, angry about the continued field. D, hopeful and peaceful future. Uh, annoyed, annoyed, annoyed with their men lagging behind.
So
A,
D, actually, yeah, it's
D.
hopeful for a peaceful future, because they kind of reconcile, and you know, they're like, hey, you know, if we can choose to make peace among our people, there is none other to interfere, no interlopers from outside. So, you know, turning over their minds the wonderful changes that this dramatic reconciliation would bring about. So there's also irony here, right? Because they're hurt and they're laying there and thinking, it's like, you know, maybe this is the time to you know, put aside our differences. And if we can get out of underneath this tree, if somebody can help us, then maybe we can work together, get our families to work together, and usher in sort of a new peace between us. And then, of course, at the end, it's not people coming to help them, it's wolves coming to eat them. So there's some irony in that. But yeah, at the beginning, you know, now all of a sudden, once they decide to reconcile, there's a little bit of hope that they can make things work between their two families. So D is in dog for number 11. And number 12, Sasha Gay, you want to read number 12 for us?
Okay. George tell Ulrich that there is none other to interfere, no interlopers from outside to stall the changes to come from their reconciliation. From the information in the passage, you can infer that George is incorrect because the men are likely to A, break their pack once rescued, B, be killed by wolves, C, feud with the forester folk, D, freeze to death in the forest. B.
Yeah, it's not going to get much farther than that tree, right? Because the way it looks, where it ends right here, right? What we know, what we can infer is that it's not going to go any further because they're not going to make it out of the situation. That's what we can infer by what we know of the story. So B is a boy. They will be killed by wolves. And let's see, Grace, you want to read 13 for us?
Why does Eric's joy tend to fear? Eric's joy tend to fear. A, Eric sees wolves approaching him and George. B, George's men will soon threaten Eric. C, Eric realizes the danger of walking alone in the forest. And D, George believes that they will not be rescued. A.
A, right? Yeah. So all of a sudden, and then he gets a little hysterical when he realizes that. So yeah, so right there you can infer that's why, right? He's turning from joy to fears when he realizes those are not men approaching, those are wolves. So A for 13. I'll go ahead and read through our last passage here. Get us through here. We have some not multiple choice, we have fill in the blank for the last 4. So here is a visit from Pauline. And it says, I don't know what to do about my husband's new wife. She won't come in. She sits on the front porch and smokes. She won't knock or ring the bell. And the only way I know she's there at all is because the dog points in the living room. The minute I see Stray standing with one paw up and his tail straight out, I say, shh, it's Pauline. I stroke his coarse fur and lean on the broom, and we wait. We hear the creak of a board, the click of a purse, a cigarette being lit, a sad, tiny cough. At last, I give up and open the door. Pauline, the afternoon light hurts my eyes. Would you like to come in? No, says Pauline. Sometimes she sits on the stoop, picking at the paint, and sometimes she sits on the edge of an empty planter box. Today, she's perched on the railing. She frowns when she sees me and lifts her small chin. She wears the same black velvet jacket she always wears, the same formal silk blouse, the same huge dark glasses, just passing by, she explains. I nod. Pauline lives 30 miles to the east in the city with Conrad. Passing by would take her one toll bridge, one freeway, and 2 backcountry roads from their flat. But lies are the least of our problems. Pauline's and mine, so I nod again, bunch my bathrobe a little tighter around my waist, try to cover one bare foot with the other, and repeat my invitation. She shakes her head so vigorously the railing lurches. Conrad, she says in her high young voice, expects me. You know how he is. So also want to point out that's first person point of view, like we talked about yesterday. How do we know that? I, right? We see the I pronoun being used. We also see her from her perspective, right? When she looks out the window, I know she's there at all is because the dog points in the living room. So just a little clue in there since we were talking about point of view yesterday. So the narrator describes Pauline as having a high young voice. Does this imply that Pauline is younger or that she is lying?
Younger.
Yeah, she's younger. Younger. Okay. So younger for 14. So our next inference we need to make here. So Conrad is the narrator's, right? We talked about it's first person narration. So who is the narrator? And well, more importantly, Conrad is who to this person?
Her
Husband?
ex-husband.
Ex-husband, right? So X hyphen HUSBAND. And of course, that would make him then Pauline's current husband, right?
Yeah.
So current husband, no husband. There we go. Having trouble today. So 15, ex-husband for the first blank, husband for the second. Pauline's current husband. She lives with a flat in the city with Conrad. So 16. On the basis of the narrator's tone and actions, what is the most logical inference about how the narrator feels about Pauline's visit? Is she
Annoyed.
she sounds, I mean, she is a little like, kind of rolling her eyes like, oh, there's old Pauline again. But she's also probably a little concerned. Yeah. Why is she here? So, and, again, she kind of, makes the, she's like, oh, I'm just passing by. Well, she lives 30 miles away. She had to pay a toll and take all these roads to get here. And, it's sort of like that thing too, when somebody shows up or you get that phone call, like if my daughter called me right now, I'd be concerned because she's in school, right? And so, when certain people show up at your house, you're like, why are you here? It's weird. So yeah, concerned. And then finally, for 17, Pauline says of Conrad, you know how he is, and the narrator understands. Based on this information, is it more likely that both characters have positive or negative feelings for Conrad?
Negative.
Negative, right? And I mean, you can also infer, because it's our narrator's ex-husband, That's another way that you could infer maybe that she has negative feelings about Conrad, right? So that's how you start, putting these things together. You weave your conclusions, your inferences together. And it's also great for, just your critical thinking and your test taking capabilities. If when you analyze things that way, right? It's like, well, take a step back and think, why, would they feel positive about it? What tips us off that we might not? That idea, how he is. That's not something you typically say to somebody in a positive way, right? You don't explain to somebody, it's like, oh, so-and-so is such a happy, blah, 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 type of person. You know how he is. No, it's usually like unspoken things. You don't have to say, it's like, well, this person is loud and, boisterous and all that stuff. You can just kind of roll your eyes. It's like, how he is. So that is number 17. Does anybody need to follow up with any of our answers? Is everybody to get all the answers there?
Yeah.
Okay. So go ahead and stop here.